morning, everyone. Yate Bene. Thank you all for joining us today. We're just gonna wait maybe a minute or so just to let a few more people trickle in. And while we wait, I'm not sure if you all just want to do a quick intro in the chat, letting us know where you're coming from. Hi, Tasha. Nice to see you in here. Hi, Winona. All right, we'll go ahead and get started then. So good morning again for everyone. I hope you are all doing well and I hope you're enjoying the warm weather. It's just after 9:30 and we'll go ahead and get started now. So hello again, and we're excited to welcome you to today's featured presentation, part of the Center for Native American Cancer Health Equity quarterly webinar series. So this is the first quarterly series we have this year. And I'll go ahead and do my introduction really quick. So Yaate She'e Chastity Bigay Yinishia, Mai Dishkis Dinishlan, Tutsutni Bashishtin, Ki Ani Dashache Arato Torchini Dashanella. I'm originally from Whippoorwill, but was raised in Farmington. And so it's really nice to see you all today. And I'm a research coordinator in Navajo or Diné. And I have Jennifer joined with me today, who will be co-facilitating and she'll be kind of monitoring the chat for us. So I'll go ahead and let Jen introduce herself.
Good morning, Yate Bene, everyone. She'e Jennifer Hudson Yinishye, Sisglani Inishli, Sinajani Bashachin, Kia Ane Dashache, Tabaha Dashanale. I'm a member of the Navajo Nation. I'm a senior community program coordinator here with C-NACHE, and as Chas said, I'll be helping with the chat today. But really excited to see everyone here and looking forward to Dr. Yellowhair's presentation.
So our first webinar this year is titled Plot Twist: How a Stock Photo Modeling Gig Accidentally Led Me to Cancer Research. So we're honored and to be joined by our featured speaker, Dr. Monica Yellowhair, who is an Assistant Director of Native American Partnerships at University of Arizona Cancer Center. And she will introduce herself more fully in just a few moments. And then just a quick note, today's session will be recorded and made available on the NAU Share YouTube channel. And for those who wish to revisit any previous presentations, they are all in that playlist. And this webinar series is made possible through the support from the American Cancer Society. And so before we begin, we'd like to take a moment to set our collective intention. We recognize that for many Native American and Indigenous communities, cancer is a culturally sensitive and sometimes spiritually prohibitive topic. And so our goal at C-NACHE is to approach this subject with respect, cultural awareness, and care, honoring the deep spiritual traditions that guide many Indigenous models of health and wellness. So at this time, we invite you to reflect quietly in your own way on your intentions for being here. You may use this moment for personal prayer, reflection, or setting a protective intention for yourself and others as we enter into this dialogue. And I'll go ahead and give everyone about a minute. Thank you all for taking that moment to ground yourself as we continue. We also want to acknowledge the land from which we host this session. So on screen is an image of our physical location, Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, overlooking the San Francisco Peaks, known colonially by that name, but held sacred by 13 Native nations in the region. And so we honor the sacred mountain and share the following land acknowledgement from NAU. Northern Arizona sits at the base of the San Francisco Peaks on homelands sacred to Native Americans throughout the region, and we honor their past, present, and future generations who have lived here for millennia and will forever call this place home. And before we turn things over to Dr. Yellowhair, here is a brief overview of who we are at the Center for Native American Cancer Health Equity, also known as C-NACHE. So we were established in 2022 through a grant from the American Cancer Society, in which C-NACHE aims to reduce the unequal burdens of cancer among Native American communities. So our focus is on three primary goals, which is improving cancer screening rates, increasing access to cancer care services, and then raising awareness about environmental contaminants that contribute to the cancer burden in Native communities. And through research, community engagement, and partnerships, we strive to advance cancer health equity in Native communities. And then we'll kind of go over a quick little overview of what these webinar series is about. And so we'll go into the purpose of quarterly webinar series. Our target audience includes Native American college and university students. Though all are welcome to join, this series seeks spotlight that many forms of cancer research happening across Turtle Island with the focus on the Four Corners region. So when many of us hear cancer research, we often can picture lab-based science, but in reality, cancer research spans many disciplines, public health, environmental science, behavioral science, policy, and even more. So this series highlights the diverse pathway available in research and cancer health and cancer equity with the goal of inspiring the next generation of Native researchers and advocates. So with that, I'm thrilled to now turn it over to our speaker, Dr. Yellowhair, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. So Dr. Yellowhair, you can take the spotlight.
Okay.
Yep, we can see it.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Yad Bene, Shea Monica Yellowhair Nishna. Kia Ani Nishna, Kisla Chitney Bashish team, Zaslana Edisha, look at the Nene Edisha. I am originally from Keyenta, Arizona. And today I am going to talk about how a stock photo modeling gig accidentally led me to cancer research. But the more I think about it, I think it was the other way around, and I am due some royalties. So I apologize. I do have a little bit of a cold, so I think if my nose or if my voice gets more raspy and nasally, I will be selling voicemails to your boss if you need to get call out. So $5 a pop. Hit me up. So, um, once upon a time, I grew up in Keyenta, Arizona, as I mentioned. I went to Monument Valley High School. From there, I graduated in 1998. And so when I was in high school, I was very, very interested in science. It's been a lifelong passion of mine ever since growing up as a kid. There was a lot of things that always interest me. And I always loved my biology courses. So even when I was a senior in high school, I was still taking advanced biology courses, but also I had expressed interest into with my teacher at the time. Shout out to Dr. LaRue at MVHS High School. She gave me the opportunity to actually help tutor students in her class, especially students who were struggling behind in biology and also helping providing extra tutor sessions for freshmen that were getting into biology at the time in high school and other classmates that needed more help and more assistance. And so I was very happy to do that and work with her. And so after I graduated high school, I went to NAU. So yes, I am an NAU Lumberjack alumni. So when I first started to go to NAU, I was majoring in secondary high school education because I wanted to become a science teacher. And so I enrolled, I started my courses, and then I had the wonderful opportunity to take a class where we were put into the into the schools, local schools, to actually teach the courses that we were interested in. So I had the fortunate experience of teaching at Mount Eldon Middle School there. I taught students from sixth to eighth grade students. It was a wonderful experience. And then so I think I was there for like a good 6 weeks. And then afterwards, I spent the rest of my time teaching back at Monument Valley for like a week and a half, teaching high school students from 9 to 10th or 9 to 12th grade. And so it's amazing what you see when you're a teacher, the spectrum of age difference. It's like the middle school students are so rambunctious. They're the big fish in their little pond, so to speak. And then when you see freshmen, they're so timid, so shy, so quiet, so different from probably when they were in eighth grade. And so it's like, okay, they got put into a bigger pond and now they're like, okay, we're the little fish. We will stand in line. So it was a very unique perspective. And the thing that my teacher, Dr. or Miss LaRue always asked me, she was like, are you sure you want to go into this? I feel like I see more in you other than being a teacher. So if I were you, I would explore other options just in case. And so after reflecting on my experience in teaching middle school and high school students, I kind of saw where she was coming from. I was like, is this the what I want to do moving forward? And so I was still taking all my biology courses at NAU, and then I stumbled across a flyer for a program. I can't remember. I think back in the day when I was a freshman or an undergrad at NAU, it was called the Minority Student Development Program. And so I was able to meet with several different faculty members and see what they were doing as far as their research in labs. And so I actually met one of the faculty members in the chemistry department, and her name is Diane Stearns. And so I call her my first science mom. And so I loved the research that she was working on. She was a toxicologist by training. She was looking at the effects of dietary chromium supplements. And so I don't know, I'm going to age myself and talk about dietary chromium. So a long time ago, people used to think that chromium was a supplement that you needed to help lose weight and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, however, most people don't know that chromium is a toxic metal, depending on the form that we're talking about. And so the research that we were doing was looking how chromium affects the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. And so it was causing all these reactions to chromium. And so that's what the work that I started out with. And so just learning from her, learning with other graduate students in the lab, I started talking about where I came from in Kayenta, and I talked about how there was a lot of abandoned uranium mines, and I've always heard stories about how uranium may be causing some of these health problems. And so with our conversations, we were looking up research that has been done about uranium. And at that time, in the early 2000s, actually probably 2000, at that point, most of the research that was done was just focusing on the radiological activity of uranium, not so much about the health effects of uranium and depleted uranium, which I'll talk about in my presentation. And so from there, as you can see, there's a little photo here, and I don't know if this pointer, can you guys see my pointer? Yes. Okay. So in this photo here, this is actually, I'm kind of glad they captured it because we were asking the simple question is, does uranium at all have an effect on simple um, plasmid DNA? And so with that, we were loading up, but I was loading up a gel electrophoresis. And it just so happened that the Minority Student Development Program was trying to update their flyers and their brochures to get more students excited and to participate in the program. And so they're like, oh, and so I was loading this gel and then they took the photo. And so, of course, my first stock photo got put on the brochure. And then and I kind of got to capture it because the information that we got from this particular experiment, the gel electrophoresis experiment that we were running, actually showed that uranium can cause strand breaks in our plasmid DNA. And so repeating this experiment over and getting enough preliminary data actually helped us write our first pilot grant, which we submitted to the NIH for U54 grant. And so with that actually helped develop the NACP grant. I guess at the time it was the Partnership for Native American Cancer Prevention. I can't remember the first acronym. But so yeah, so that little gel photo and the work subsequent from that photo actually help guide and get my interest and get into cancer, or I'm sorry, in research and science in the first place. And so with that, I quickly changed my major from secondary science education, and I already was doing a lot of coursework, as I mentioned, in biology. And so I didn't want to have any of my credits go to waste. And so um, a lot of my credits that I was taking gave me enough time to switch my major to microbiology, which I'm glad I did because it gives me a great understanding of what it looks of what biology is from a micro level. And so since then, I graduated with my bachelor's degree in microbiology from NAU, as I mentioned, studying the genotoxic effects of chromium and depleted uranium. And so from there, I was just wondering what I'm going to do next because, again, I was one of the first in my family to get a bachelor's degree from any university. And being in the environment and being in the lab that I was in, I was kind of wondering, okay, what can I do with this? How can I move forward? But again, being with the lab mates that I have, I've seen them saying, oh, yeah, I'm going to get my master's in chemistry. And I'm like, ooh, is that what will that do for you? And then so just having a supportive team around me, having my family support, it pushed me to actually apply for my master's, to do a master's program in chemistry. And then I still had the opportunity to still continue to collaborate and work with Dr. Stearns in the lab and expand on the research that we were doing at the time at NAU. And so I was able to meet and collaborate with other professors there. And so I see one of my other science moms, Dr. Janie Ingram, here on the call. So she was wonderful. And I remember when she first arrived to NAU, and I was so excited to see another Native scientist. And so after I did my master's in chemistry, I decided to go into toxicology because a lot of the work that we were doing is all based on the fundamentals of toxicology. And then on top of that, having a mentor and a professor who does study toxicology, it kind of it gave me the leg up. And through the partnership with NACP, I was actually able to meet a lot of wonderful faculty here at the University of Arizona, where I met my PI that I ended up doing my research program with here at the U of A, Dr. Clark Lance. And so he was very excited to help me on campus. And so I went through the whole interview process through the College of Pharmacy. I didn't know if I was going to get in, but little did I know that the Pharm Tox program here at the U of A was very, very competitive. The whole interview process was a little nerve-wracking, but I think still maybe now, I don't know, I haven't seen the latest ratings of the Pharm Tox program, but when I was there, it was one of the top 5 programs in the country. And so I got asked the questions of, are you sure you can handle this rigorous program? We see that you've published, we see that you have an interest. How is that going to also make you a standout? We've had native students that have come before you and they didn't work out. And so how do we know that you're going to make it through this program? And so them not knowing me, a Kiani woman, don't tell a Kiani woman no, because yeah, I will bounce back. And so from there, I got into the program, I got accepted. And then the crazy thing is that when I first got to the U of A, I already knew who I wanted to work with, but I was still required to do rotations and learn from other faculty members and go into other labs and learn other techniques, which is great. And so I recommend that for anybody. However, when I first got to campus, as I mentioned, Dr. Land said, okay, I only have enough funding for you for your first year. So it's going to be up to you to apply for fellowships because after that, we need to find funding for you to continue your PhD work. And so he sent me a link to the NIH Ruth Christine fellowship. And so I said, okay, because I already know that you have a project in mind, you already know what you want to do, so write about it. Use your preliminary data, use everything that you have and apply for this grant. And I said, okay. So I remember sitting in my rotations, writing and taking classes and then doing the work in the rotations. And then I had another third year PhD student ask me, he's like, oh, what are you doing? I said, oh, I have to apply for this fellowship because of reasons for financial reasons. And then he's like, oh, I've applied for that like 3 times already and I never got it. So don't expect to get it on your first try. I was like, oh, okay. Well, thanks for that. But anyway, I kept writing. I submitted my application, I believe it was early November. And so I had to wait all the way until April till I found out that I got the fellowship. And so, yes. And then so, of course, that one student was bitter and he was like, oh, you only got it because you're native. I'm like, I've heard you tried to apply for 3 times. Would you like me to help look at your application? And I can probably make some suggestions for you. Yeah, he didn't really talk to me after that, but I got my fellowship, and so the work that I'm going to talk about now just talks about the studies that I've done, and it's what got me through my PhD program. And so with that, I will keep moving forward. And so I do talk a little bit about the background of uranium, just because I know it's a natural occurring heavy metal. Most people hear uranium, they think about radiation, which is what you should think about. It has 16 different isotopes, with 238 being the most abundant. And so you also have 2 other isotopes, 235 and 234. And so these are the most radioactive isotopes, even though it makes up less than 1%. It has 5 different oxidation states, with 6 and 4 being the most abundant. And so in nature, it's found in this structure here. As you know, when we think about uranium, we think about radiation. And so as uranium decays, it releases ionizing radiation, and so in the form of radon gas, but it can also produce alpha, beta, and gamma rays. And so the thing about uranium is when they process uranium, it's kind of like eating a pomegranate. You have the fruit, you have the outside, you have the casings, you have the seeds. And so when they process it, basically they remove all the casings. They try to take out as much of the juice as possible, in this case, which is 234 and 235. And they use that to fuel for nuclear reactors and other things that they need for um, the uranium. And what you have left is mostly 238, so it's not as radioactive as natural occurring uranium. And so, with the huge pile of depleted uranium, there's a lot of uses for it. And so, as I mentioned, it has about 60% of the radioactivity of natural occurring uranium. And so, since it is a very heavy, dense metal, it's used for anti-tank weapons, ammunition rounds, tank armor, armor-piercing bullets. And so in the Gulf War from 1991 to 2003, over in just the low estimates from the US, over 334 tons were used, and I don't know what the number is from other countries that have used it. Um, and so it has a huge military application. And so other uses for uranium has also been, as since it is a very heavy, dense metal, they even use it in airplanes as counterweights for the planes. This has also led to a lot of exposure in our Gulf War veterans. And so that has led to a cohort study from the Department of Defense. And they're following a cohort of people who were exposed to uranium in the Gulf War conflict after 30 years and to see what the exposure looks like in those veterans. And so what does that mean for us here in northern Arizona, especially in the Southwest? And so as I mentioned, uranium is naturally occurring here in the Southwest. I've talked about how uranium has been used in occupational in mining. Um, in our communities, you can see since it was a matter of national security when uranium first started mining in the early 40s. They hired people who lived in the area to mine the uranium. Again, most of them were Navajo workers who did not speak English as a first language. They didn't have a Western education, and the government failed to educate the miners about the hazards and working with uranium. And so they actually brought in people from the Public Health Service to monitor, but yet they were told to not explain the hazards to the people that were being exposed during the mining process. And so you can see the photo here with miners that didn't have the proper PPE needed to work with the mine. And then so the photo here, there's an X-ray of a Gulf War veteran that actually has uranium shrapnel embedded in their muscle. And so you figure that they could take it out, but however, the pieces are so small in the muscle, surgeons don't want to take it out because it will cause more damage to the muscle. And so they end up leaving it in the tissue. And so the cohort that I was talking about, even after 30 years, they're still excreting high amounts of uranium in their urine. And I was at a conference a few years ago, and the same group of people that were following the cohort had an update for this particular X-ray. And I haven't seen the published photo yet, but the photo that I did see at the conference, they showed that the uranium little pieces of shrapnel actually looks like pieces of gel inside the muscle. And so the body's slowly trying to get rid of it, but it's still there. And then moving on, what does that mean for environmental exposures? And so after the Cold War was over, since it was no longer a matter of national security, a lot of the mines that did open up on the reservation, they were all privately owned. We didn't have OSHA, as you can see by the photo, and we also didn't have any remediation happening. And so a lot of the private owned companies pretty much just shut the mines down and left town. They really didn't do anything for reclamation. There was no signage, there was no fencing off of anything. And as a result, a lot of it has contaminated many water sources across the Southwest. In the worst case scenarios, again, as I mentioned, that a lot of people weren't educated about uranium and the aftermaths of it. They've seen the materials that they were pulling out of the mines, and for them, they thought it was construction materials. And so in these photos here, you can see that they have built hogans with the construction material. They built some houses. And so this particular hogan is located near Monument Valley. And so the EPA actually went into this hogan after this family has been living 3 generations living in this hogan, moving out, moving into the blue house next door, using that hogan for storage after it started to deteriorate. So when the EPA went in there to look and monitor to see what the radiation levels that were being emitted, they brought their Geiger counters in and it went through the roof. And so the family that was living in that hogan was being irradiated 3 times higher than the safe exposure limit of radon exposure. And so as a result, a lot of the family members were sick and they never knew why. And so they ended up clearing this area and finding other sites across the reservation in similar high levels of radon exposure. And so this is an older map. I know if you've ever listened to Dr. Ingram's talk, she has a lot of other maps that showcase a lot of where the abandoned mines are. But this one is the map that I show that has a lot of the clusters where the mining occurred on the Navajo Nation. The 2 black circles you see here on this particular map are where 2 Superfund sites are. This one in the teal is a proposed Superfund site near Church Rock, or yeah, no, not Church Rock, I'm sorry, near Cove in that whole entire area. And so when we say that the mines were abandoned, you can see in the photos around the map showcase where abandoned uranium mines are at, or when they're located at. And so again, there was no fencing, no signage whatsoever. So people have open access to these areas. You have animals grazing in these areas. And so um, finally, after a lot of this work started to come forward, you can see from universities from NAU, from U of A, from the University of New Mexico, made a concerted effort to start researching the effects of this, especially from these legacy mines, and working with the EPA and Navajo Nation EPA to finally start putting the signage up, starting to monitor some of these water sources to see whether or not if they should use this well or if it's safe to use. And so if your question is about water, I like to show this publication that came out of Dr. Ingram's lab looking at the distribution of uranium and arsenic across several wells on the Navajo Nation. And so they have found, they looked at over 144 wells. And as you can see, there are some areas that are below the EPA guideline of maximum contaminant level, which is 30 ppb on the Navajo Nation in the little golden dots. In the little brown dots are where you can see where they exceed the EPA exposure. Arsenic is also another metal that is carcinogenic, and so in the mining process with the processing of the uranium, you have a lot of co-exposures, and so that was another concern is how are these metals interacting and how they're affecting the water, if it's affecting anybody's health. And as you can see here, there are some areas where there are higher levels of arsenic than this EPA guideline, and other areas where it's below the EPA guidelines. And so when you think about that, again, just thinking about why is this important, when we start looking at the cancer incidence rate across Arizona, and so this is just incidence rates, meaning how often cancer occurs. And so we can see in Native American males, we have colorectal, kidney, prostate, lung, and liver cancer being the top 5 cancer incident rates, with colorectal, kidney, and liver cancer being much, much more higher in Native men than all males in Arizona. As far as females, uterine and kidney cancers levels are much more higher in Native American females than they are in all females in Arizona. And other disparities that we're seeing is cervical, myeloma, gallbladder, and stomach cancer. And so this is also important to think about what cancer mortality looks like in Arizona. And so in the red is all of Arizona, what the cancer mortality trend looks like. So it's pretty linear. It doesn't change over time, especially from 2009 all the way to 2022. But when we look at American Indian Alaska Natives in Arizona, you can see it goes up and down. It fluctuates, but it also is coming up on an uptrend in 2002 or 2022, sorry. And so when we look at the top 5 cancer mortalities in Arizona, in Native men, we have liver, prostate, colorectal, and kidney cancers as being the most desperate, which is much more higher than all males. In women, it's liver, lymphoma, and pancreatic cancer. And other cancers that are also have mortality disparities are ovarian, uterine, and again, stomach cancer. And so, what does this mean and why is this important? So, when you think about what cancer looks like specifically in Navajo, you have higher levels of kidney, stomach, and liver cancer incidence compared to non-Hispanic whites who also live in the same area in Arizona and New Mexico. So, why are these cancers much more higher in our Navajo people as opposed to other people living in the in surrounding areas? And so this is cancer incidence. And so when we look at mortality, again, we're seeing stomach, liver, kidney, and gallbladder cancer, much more higher in Navajo people as opposed to non-Hispanic whites living in the same area. And so when you think about uranium, uranium usually targets kidney, bone, and lung. And so I have a little graphic here that shows how people are usually exposed to uranium. So you can either be breathing it in. I've mentioned the depleted uranium fragments that can get into the muscle. You can also, accidentally ingest it, if you have dust that gets on your food, you're eating it that way, or maybe in a lot of the research that Dr. Ingram shows, where they're watching and exploring to see animals that are grazing in these areas if they have higher amounts of uranium in the organs, and so we could be possibly ingesting uranium that way. So once uranium gets into the system, they get into the circulatory systems, and so the blood, and so that circulates the metals around the body. And so from there, when you breathe it in, it goes straight to your lymph nodes or it goes to your GI tract, again to the circulatory system. If it gets into your muscle, to your circulatory system. And so the way how the body tries to either get rid of it, you can breathe it back out. If you ingest it, you can excrete it through your feces. Or if you ingest it, or if it's in the circulatory system, the first place it will go is the kidney. So that way you can urinate it out. In other cases, it can also go to the liver again in this cycle. And so, and in some cases, if it's a chronic long-term exposure, it can also go to the bones where it can actually store in the bones long term. And so, since we are seeing these increase in cancer disparities, such as stomach, kidney, liver, and gallbladder, these particular cancers aren't related to ionizing radiation exposure. And so, as I mentioned before, we started all this uranium when everyone first thought about it was radiation exposure, how it causes bone cancer. However, there was very limited knowledge. And so, with the research that we had started in our lab and many other labs, we started looking at the genotoxic effects, looking how it causes chromosomal aberrations, how it causes micronuclei formations, cystochromatid exchanges, and DNA damage. And so, and again, we're trying to look at it independent of its radiation exposure. So since you can't really fully separate the radiation from the metal, we work with depleted uranium, which has a reduced radiation. And so a lot of the studies that have happened before we started our research and in conjunction with the research that we started looking at, again, started looking at how it affects Gulf War veterans who are exposed, looking at birth outcomes, especially in women near the uranium mining areas, what it's doing in the water, especially in mouse models, and again, in some chromosomal aberrations in other miners in different countries who are exposed. And again, just trying to get a better, clearer picture of the toxicity of what it can be doing independent of radiation exposure. And so a lot of the gaps that we were trying to fill is one, does uranium induce DNA damage? And then once it does cause, if it does cause damage, what type of damage is it causing? So DNA can be damaged in several different ways. You can get strand breaks, you can get in this case, uranium binding to a DNA and causing it to break, or it can cause strand breaks in both your DNA strands. And then so once your DNA is broken, what repair processes get activated? So our DNA actually has a repair process. So depending on the type of break, it activates one of these three repair processes to repair itself. And so we wanted to also know what are the effects of DNA repair on these processes. And then also, what are the consequences? So if you have damaged DNA, does it have an effect on the cell cycle or does it cause apoptosis? And so what apoptosis is a regulated cell death. So basically, when you think about if you get a sunburn, if you go outside and you forget to put on sunscreen, you get a burn or your skin starts to peel. So that's an example of you getting DNA damage onto your skin cells. It cannot repair itself, and so it induces apoptosis. And in some cases, depending on how bad your burn is, it kills off your cells. And so the cells tend to induce cell suicide. I say cell suicide, apoptosis, so that way it can stop replicating and allow for new growth to come in. Otherwise, if they didn't have that mechanism, that can lead to skin cancer, myeloma, and other things if you don't have that repair process in place. And the other thing that can happen is what we're also showing is if your DNA is damaged and it is constantly getting replicated with and ignoring these checkpoints, that it can cause chromosomal aberrations and mutations that may overall lead to the snowball effect of getting cancer and other diseases. And so this is the thought process of the work that I was doing during my dissertation. And so, long story short, skipping a lot of the science and the research information, but we were showing that depleted uranium actually does have chemical effects that are different from natural occurring radiation uranium. And so when you look at alpha radiation, it causes more double strand breaks over rather than single strand breaks. If you look at low concentrations of uranium, we see that it causes strand breaks and DNA adducts. If we look at the mechanism, radiation is usually causing oxidative stress, and so it's killing cells and nearby cells. If it's with uranium, we were seeing that it was causing DNA hydrolysis. So where basically the uranium binds to the DNA, so something as simple as water can come in and cause the DNA damage. And so alpha radiation has been shown to activate the DNA repair processes. And the work that we were doing in the lab shows that low doses of uranium does not activate these repair processes. And so we're trying to figure out why that's doing that. Alpha radiation causes the cell cycle to pause in the G2M phase. However, when we look at the uranium in our research research, it shows that uranium bypasses the cell cycle arrest, and so it keeps allowing the damaged DNA to continue in the cell cycle process. Low alpha radiation causes apoptosis, so it causes the cells to die off. However, in low doses of uranium, we're seeing that in depleted uranium, it doesn't cause apoptosis. And so cells that are damaged can continue to grow. So this is also great information to know moving forward. And so what is a larger big picture? And so this is a picture of mine tailings in Moab, Utah. If you're ever familiar, if you've ever been there, there's the Colorado River. And here is a pile of mine tailings in 2000 when we started our work. And these are two semi trucks in this photo here. So just this kind of gives you a scale of how huge these mine tailings are next to the Colorado River. And so what does that mean? So you have your tailings, if you look at from this point of view, where your tailings are on top, you have all the seepage that can get into the groundwater, which is the Colorado River, that can actually take that downstream, which is the greater Southwest. And so it was estimated that it can put over 16 million tons of, this was a 16 million tons of tailings that can actually have over 28,000 gallons of radioactive waste per day. And so this also was a Superfund site in Moab, Utah. And so in the Bush administration, they allocated 25 million to clean up this particular site. And this is what it looked like in 2012. The cleanup of this site began in 2009. And so at this point in time, over 40% has been removed. And as you can see here, they are monitoring this. And it was supposed to be finished last year. And unfortunately, I don't have any new photos of this particular site or any information of what this looks like. But this is a huge, long, lengthy cleanup process of over 25 years. And so this can also cause some potential chronic low dose exposures downstream. And so moving on, um, after I finished my PhD, I became and started working at the Cancer Center here, doing a lot of work for my postdoc. As you can see here in this other photo, yes, one of my other stock modeling photos where I became a banner, I became a cover of a booklet, and again, no royalty fees in my stock modeling photos. But however, I did become appointed assistant director for community outreach and engagement in 2020. A lot of the work that I have been doing since then is focusing on working on colorectal cancer screening rates and a lot of work engaging with communities and getting more information about cancer awareness and education out to the general public. And just recently, this past November, I was appointed the Assistant Director for Native American Partnerships in 2025. And so a lot of the research that I have done since then focuses on community-based participatory research. And also, how do we translate the work that we're doing at the bench into community? And so that is something that's also very important. I mean, it's nice to do a lot of this work at the bench, but what does that mean for the communities that you're trying to help? And so it's also very important to also have that flexibility to go from the lab into the community. And so a lot of great researchers are doing a lot of great things and moving and working with communities. And so as a NCI Comprehensive Cancer Center here, we look at cancer along the whole entire continuum, in this case, a spectrum. So we look at everything from prevention, screening, diagnosis, treatment, and whether if that's recovery and survivorship, or unfortunately, if that comes to palliative care, which is end of life care. And so, again, when we think about what does this look like when it comes to tribal communities, um, as you can see here, tribal communities have a lot of barriers. And so some of them being communication, there's a lot of challenges when we come to cancer knowledge, patient navigation services, support groups, and how physicians actually talk to cancer patients. And so some of the things that we have been working on is expanding cultural, language relevant resources, sharing our cancer survivor stories, especially in tribal communities and native people who are cancer survivors, making sure they're there to give their voices out, increasing a lot of education and training, maintaining surveillance with the tribes and working with other IHS facilities. And so some of the outreach initiatives that we do, and a lot of this work we're working closely with the Pasco tribe. Again, we host Let's Talk About Cancer series, and yes, we do serve tacos. We try to support our local taco trucks and food businesses, and they come out. It's a lunch and learn, so we like to bring out our researchers, our clinicians, our oncologists, nurse navigators, and survivors. And it's an informal conversation. We invite community members, and so it's very popular. We get a lot of good feedback on these things. Um, we do a lot of outreach for our cancer survivors with our Beyond Cancer series. And so with this, we work in partnership with Arizona Department of Health Services. We travel across the state, and our last one that we recently had was in Window Rock, and I see our Navajo Nation Breast and Cervical Cancer program in the house. And so we worked with them. And so again, just trying to have a platform for cancer survivors to talk about their cancer journey, share resources for survivors and caregivers. And also what we love working about with our cancer survivors is they are the biggest advocate. They are the ones reminding people to not ignore your symptoms, get screened, take care of your health, and also what cancer looks like for them and in their journey. They share talk about how their family has been there for them, how they incorporate traditional healing within their cancer care, and what got through them through the process. And so we are going to be hosting one again. I'm putting in the plug in June, so stay tuned for that. Um, we work in tandem with the Native American Partnership Program and at NAU to increase cancer education and navigator training with individuals who work in the communities, especially in Native communities. So we've trained a lot of patient navigators and community health workers. As I mentioned, with our partnership with the Pasco tribe, we are actually funding a nurse navigator there who does a lot of outreach and education. And so we are working to increase connections to cancer care, increase in knowledge and awareness for the events that we host. For example, the Let's Talk About Cancer, increasing our screening activity there at Pascua. Another big thing that we're helping them with is their tribal population health assessment, helping them find out what cancer looks like in their community. So the tribe there is leading a lot of the activities. So they're in charge of developing the survey. They're going to be administering the survey, collecting the data, doing the data analysis and disseminating the data back to their community. Our hand as the Cancer Center, we're providing a lot of support for the training, for the technical support, data analysis, and I'm a co-PI on this study and I won't have access to the data, is how much we're respecting their tribal sovereignty and data sovereignty on this. And so, and I like to put this in here because dietary factors, it plays a huge role in barriers when it comes to health. And so and I like to showcase because there are some things that we can do as a cancer center as far as addressing some of these barriers, but there are some other things that are beyond our control. And so, again, a lot of tribal areas are a food desert, but the tribe is trying to work on some of these things by increasing funding for agricultural programs, building sustainable nutritional programs, and increasing taxes on junk food and tobacco and soda. Um, Geography and transportation is a huge barrier. So when you think about how long distances people have to travel to get cancer care is a lot, especially me being from Kansas. I know these distances, and a lot of you do know as well. And so some of the things that we're looking into is how can we support cancer support services and also thinking about mobile services. And so again, this is important when you think about cancer patients by the numbers, and I'm not going to go to the full thing because just I feel like I'm running out of time. And so we also like to showcase how many oncologists people can see, depending on when they're living at. So in Flagstaff, you have one oncologist per 1,500 people. Phoenix, you have one oncologist per every 1,200 people. Tucson, one oncologist per every 7,000 people. The Navajo Nation in 2019 had zero oncologists for 173,000 people. So that is a huge disparity. And so that's why we were happy to see Tuba City start their specialty care program in 2019. And so it's the only cancer treatment facility on the Navajo Nation currently. And so they offer a lot of things for the patients in the area. And so some of the things that as a cancer center here, we're trying to expand and work more with the Tuba City Healthcare. We have the Arizona Clinical Trials Network, again, expanding among clinical trials and clinical care to other rural areas that have a huge Hispanic and Native American communities in those areas. We are trying to work with other partners to extend mobile screening, in this case, working with the Paskayaki tribe and getting assured imaging to get more breast cancer mobile units out there to get more women screened for breast cancer. Moving on, there's a lot of cultural considerations that we also got to think about. So, biospecimen collection, how can we incorporate traditional healing, um, fatigue and burnout in some of these healthcare facilities. And so, some of the things that we're working on is promoting research on screening, doing environmental scans at healthcare facilities, and incorporating traditional healing with the mainstream practices. And so we have a moonshot initiative where we worked with several different native serving clinics across Arizona, hiring patient navigators, working with them, training with them, and they were the big push to get more fit kits throughout the community. And so I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but with the hard work of the navigators in these clinics, they increased colorectal cancer screening rates in three of the sites that we worked with, in some cases as low as 17% jump or even as high as 155% jump in cancer screening rates at those facilities. So great work with navigators. We have a Circle of Holistic Care program, again, doing a survey with our current cancer patients to see what their interests are as far as integrating oncology. We asked them what are their top 5 therapies of interest, and then what are their top concerns for barriers to participate in some of these things. And again, trying to work to see how we can get more of these services and integrate more traditional healing with patients who are also undergoing Western cancer treatments to overall build healthier outcomes, build resiliency for survival, and encourage patient well-being. So with that, I am open to taking questions. So thank you again, and I'm happy to answer anything you may have.
Wow, sheesh, Monica, you have such an amazing story and really all the work that you're doing. It was really inspiring to see. And yes, all round of applause for Dr. Yellowhair for everything that she's doing to improve health equity in cancer. So we do have a few minutes. We can go ahead and open it up to some questions. We do encourage any students if they want to ask any questions, but since we're a little low on time, we'll go ahead and open it up. And then you can take yourself off mute or you can put it in the chat and I can read that off too.
Looks like we have one question in the chat so far from Rydell Totocini. He asks, you mentioned cleanup. Can you explain more about where uranium mill tailings are being displaced?
So I wish I knew more about that. Unfortunately, I don't. And I know in some cases, when they cap a lot of the mines, they try to build a lot of structure around it to try to minimize wind blowing the tailings in some cases. In some of the pictures that I've shown, some of the tailings are very, very small. So I'm sure, and this is where the term, what is it, what they call it? I'm trying to be cognizant of the term. It gets racial environmental cleanup. So you saw the huge cleanup in Moab. Again, those are huge mining tailings. But in some cases, in some communities, the tailings are not as massive. And so they have to focus on where the cleanup is going. And so in some cases across the reservation, they have Superfund sites. And again, if it's a huge impact to the community, that's where they'll target first. And so some of the things that I've seen is where they remove it. Well, I don't know where they remove the tailings to, But they do cap the mines. They try to put structural barriers in place to contain the materials from leaching out to other areas. Unfortunately, some of those areas, the containment may have been leached. So, for example, in Church Rock, New Mexico, they had an area where the containment breached and it contaminated the water in the local area in New Mexico. And so they had to clean that up as well. So I wish I had more information. I'm sorry, I don't know about that.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. And then I see that we have Michael, your hand is raised. You can go ahead and ask your question. And Michael is a previous NASWAC student too, so it's always awesome to see you in here, Michael.
Thanks, Chastity. Hi, Dr. Yellowhair. Nice to meet you. My name is Michael Sam. I work as an epidemiologist at the Albuquerque Area Southwest Tribal Epicenter, Aztec, in Albuquerque. And we were actually funded through the Moonshot Initiative too to increase colorectal screenings within our service region here in Albuquerque. And I'm just curious to know, through your guys' efforts with colorectal cancer screening, just curious to know what kind of barriers you guys have seen. And then on top of that too, one of the things I'm working on now is conducting focus groups just among Native American men, among some of the tribal clinics and communities that we assisted with the screening initiative with. And just curious to know if there's been any sort of things that you've seen, maybe even just among Native American men, such as barriers or anything, any specific as far as just health promotional materials that may, be specified towards, specific subpopulations to increase screenings as well as.
Yeah, and so thank you for your question. And with our Moonshot grant, we actually did work with the University of New Mexico Comprehensive Cancer Center as well as Stevenson Cancer Center in Oklahoma as part of this grant. And so I am aware of the work that you guys do. So I know with our navigators, we had monthly roundtable discussions, and so they would always discuss some of the barriers that they saw in their clinics. They also mentioned things that had worked in their clinics. And so some of the barriers that they were seeing is just getting the fit kits back in some cases and also keeping in contact with some people. Those were some of the barriers, is also just getting the fit kits returned. Some of the things though, and the things that we talked about in those discussions about what were some of the facilitators, one that we saw is actually making sure that we hire navigators that are from that community. That goes a long way because they know people coming into the clinic. They're like, oh, hey, Auntie, I know you're of age. You should also get screened for this. And just that constant reminder, helping them remind to get screened for cancer. Oh, we have happy birthday. It's time for this annual checkup. You should also get screened for this. And just keeping in constant contact. I know our COE office helped with the teams to develop culturally tailored information that they needed. Um, Depending on the tribe that we were working with, we tailored the information to their specific tribe and what they handed out. Um, and then just providing support for one another. So I think that goes a long way, is especially if you have different navigators in different locations. I think that goes a long way. So they have a support team that they're not alone. They can share a lot of stories and a lot of things that they're doing within their communities that is very, very helpful. And it's also a very helpful tool to, if you're working with different tribes, I think that goes a long way as well, just to kind of show what they're doing in their area and learning with each other and what they can do. And men overall in general is a very, very hard demographic. We've had, I don't know how many events that focus on prostate cancer, and we've had over 70% of our participants are women. And so it's hard getting the men in the group. And so that's the struggle bus. And so again, working with our community advisory board to get some ideas on how can we get more men in the room to talk about these things. And so what we found that has worked in the past is having a panel of men on men's health. And so they're there to talk about what the challenges they face. And of course, a lot of the questions they get are from the women because they're concerned about their partners, their brothers, their sons, their nephews, their grandparents, and their fathers. And so, but having men there to talk about things, that goes a long way, I think. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Dr. Yellowhair. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. I know even within, I mean, because I'm Navajo too, but we've had initiatives like, for example, in like Jemez, where like they've been able to do like a step-by-step video demonstrations of the like how to use a fit kit, even like in their language of Toa.
Hmm.
Modulate had something similar in which they did something in Navajo, but I'm not sure. But even then, like in all of those communities that we work with, like we've done our best to even host like men's health fairs, and like you mentioned, like even then it's like most majority women, and a lot of the testimonies or stories we hear is like, oh my wife, my spouse, whoever made me come, kind of
Yeah.
thing, kind of like always those storylines. So it's always interesting to hear a different perspective. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences.
Mhm.
Thank you for that, Michael. So we'll go. I'm going to be mindful of everyone's time. I know it's 10:30. Dr. Yellowhair did graciously offer to stay 5 to 10 minutes afterwards, but for this webinar purpose, we're going to go ahead and just do a quick closing. I know Jen did put a survey or an eval link in the chat. If you are all able to, go ahead and do the QR code to do the survey eval. It really helps us kind of inform future webinars. And then the link is in the chat if you want to do it through your desktop or laptop. I just want to say again, thank you so much, Dr. Yellowhair, for your story, for your academic journey, for sharing your beautiful modeling pictures. I wish you got royalties as well.
I
And
still have hope that,
absolutely,
The
I'll
funny
help
thing is
write.
that photo actually showed up at all three universities. So the first one, when I first got to U of A, I went to the other side of campus, which I'm never in. I went there for a meeting. And what did I see? My photo advertising for the molecular cellular biology program at U of A. I'm like, hey, I didn't even go here for my undergrad, and yet there's my photo. And I've also seen my photo at ASU too. I'm like, wow, I really should have gotten royalties for that photo.
We'll start a petition for you to get royalties from all three universities.
Yes.
But again, thank you so much. Did you want to have any final reflections or any parting words before we end today?
Well, I want to thank everybody. I appreciate you all joining me, and please do not hesitate to email me if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer anything that you may have.
Awesome. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today, and we hope to see you at the next one. Until then, take care and have a good rest of your day.